On this week's NFV SDN Reality Check, we will talk with OpenNet and Procera about the impact virtualization is having on policy and charging systems, and Verizon on its growing NFV and SDN plans.
CommScope, thinking beyond today's technology to help you make the best decision for your network and your business. Telecom Careers, the #1 global telecom and wireless job board, telecomcareers.com.
Thanks for joining us on this week's NFV SDN Reality Check. I'm your host, Dan Meyer, Editor-in-Chief of RCR Wireless News. Well, obviously, virtualization is a big topic going across the telecom industry nowadays, and obviously part of the reason why we have this show. Big changes going on in the networks and how operators are handling their networks. One thing that is obviously been challenged a lot is how carriers are looking at the terms carrier grade, for instance, which is how carriers traditionally have looked at rolling out services on their network. Carrier grade typically referred to a very high standard that telecom operators are required for their networks. But as we move towards virtualization, these terms carrier grade and other terms like that have traditionally been used in telecom are looking to change as operators look towards virtualization and software platforms to roll out new services. This is impacting a lot on these networks, including the policy and charging systems. Joining us today to talk on this topic is Thomas Vasson, who's the subscriber experience evangelist at Procera Networks, and Jerry Donahoe, who's the Director of Solutions Engineering at OpenNet. Both guys are joining us from Europe. Thomas is in Sweden, and Jerry's joining us from Dublin, Ireland. So, hey guys, thanks for joining us today. We appreciate it. Maybe start off with, I guess, Thomas, maybe give us a quick intro of yourself and the company for those who maybe don't know much about Procera.
Sure. So Thomas Vasson, a Dutch guy living in Sweden, been working with telecoms a little bit over 18 years. Right now for Procera Networks. Procera Networks, DPI-based subscriber experience vendor, and we work together with OpenNet and the other guys in this Etsy POC recently that we're going to talk about.
Very good. Sounds good. Well, great. Well, how about Jerry? A little quick introduction of yourself and of OpenNet.
Yeah, hi. My name is Jerry Donahoe. I'm Director of Solutions Engineering in OpenNet, and I mainly deal with our partner ecosystem. And OpenNet basically are a major BSS vendor. We're currently deployed in, I think, 8 out of the top 10 tier 1 operators in the world. And we primarily look at policy and charging control. I guess we'll be talking about that more or less today.
That sounds great. Well, great. Definitely appreciate it. And obviously, this is a great show for us because it's, I think, my first all-international cast, which is great. And also the first time I've had 2 guests on at one time, so hopefully I don't screw this up too badly. But guys, we definitely appreciate the time today on this. So yeah, let's talk a bit about, and obviously virtualization is a big word going across the telecom market. There's been a lot of talk about, I guess the impact this will have on OSS systems, but also it seems like there's a lot of impact perhaps on the BSS side as well. I know obviously with policy and charging, there's different aspects of both the OSS and BSS systems. So maybe I was hoping to get from you guys maybe a little insight on how you view virtualization impacting these systems for telecom operators. Maybe Thomas, maybe your insight first on how you see virtualization impacting what you guys are doing and maybe how telecom operators are kind of rolling out and supporting their legacy systems.
Sure, thanks, Dan. We think that the BSS side is likely to virtualize quite a bit faster since it's not in the data plane, and it can often easily exist in shared virtualized environments. And charging on differentiated service models is really to go down to applications that subscribers care about. That has been a real challenge for operators. But the reason for that is that it has been difficult to have the right DPI PCF equipment needed installed covering the right traffic and installed covering with scale towards the complexity of the service design and the increase of traffic volume. With NFV, this is changing. It's becoming very agile, and gives the ability to operators to dynamically evolve their innovation service models and dive deep into the packet flow. And the VNF manager will then secure that virtualized DPI PCF software will scale with the needs. And this will really open up the doors towards doing temporary campaigns, doing custom policy settings, and increase flexibility, and most important, speed for service creation.
Very interesting. Yeah, it's an interesting point you bring up about the fact that you guys see BSS as being perhaps impacted more rapidly by this move to virtualization than OSS. That's interesting take there. So I don't know, maybe Jerry, maybe what's your view on this? And maybe, do you see BSS as being impacted pretty rapidly as well when it comes to this move towards virtualization?
Yeah, actually, BSS systems have been deployed virtualized for many years, and some of our biggest systems in tier ones are currently virtualized. So it's more the network virtualization, I think, that's going to be the radical change. Legacy BSS systems have been expecting kind of static situations, gateways and components in the network don't come and go. With network functions virtualization, that's a different situation. The concept of elastic scalability means endpoints can appear and disappear. That basically means that a new way of thinking has to be thought out in terms of dynamically accommodating the network as it grows and shrinks. The other thing, of course, is there's going to be a revolution in the business models that operators can potentially deploy. Things like self-service, new partner portals, enterprise portals. That basically means that the way companies need to charge and engage is radically going to change, and there's going to be a massive requirement for a move to more real-time systems, I think.
Interesting. Yeah, that's a good point. I mean, obviously, the business model of this is always going to be the biggest, perhaps, challenge for operators because, again, as these are companies that are looking to make money, and so if there's no business model to doing these things, that makes it more difficult to kind of push us up the C-level chain, I guess, to get approval on this. So that's always going to be the big challenge, it seems like, for these operators. I guess maybe Jerry, maybe a little follow-up. I mean, beyond, I guess, that part of it, I mean, what do you see as being some of the bigger challenges to operators as they kind of look to integrate their legacy charging systems into these virtualization plans? Do you see like anything specifically sticking out that you guys have seen for this? Yeah,
the legacy systems are really going to struggle, and as I was saying earlier, new thinking is required. Give you a quick example. Most systems build based on call data records. They're typically spun out every few minutes, maybe every 15 minutes off a static gateway. And network functions virtualization, the gateway may not be there in 15 minutes. So, that basically means that you have to get the billing information out of it when it's instantiated, and you have to process it in real time. There's no going back. And current legacy systems, if something happens, you can go back to the gateway and ask for maybe 30 days worth of information to be respun out. That doesn't exist anymore. Systems are so dynamic now. We're talking real time. And if, many legacy systems will simply not be able to cope with this.
Interesting. Yeah, well, that's a good point, because obviously, I mean, again, this new move towards not just near real time, but actual real time is going to be huge on this. And I'm guessing, Thomas, for you guys, I mean, obviously, with the DPI being a very big part of this, I'm guessing you guys have a pretty interesting view of how these operations are going to be, integrated over time for telecom operators.
Yeah, for sure. And if you look at the operators, the complete BSS stack, I think that it's very common nowadays that operators are just a bit risk averse and don't try to migrate the customers' profiles from one system to a newer system, but they are all fully committed into deploying the new, more agile environments. And I see various operators having different strategies with coping with this. Some do some type of gradual migration, very careful. Some invest a lot in life extenders for the old platforms, for traditional services. But what I see increasingly much in Europe is that the big operators, they actually start new brands. So an actual light brand as such with their own BSS stack built in complete modern ways. And this you could see maybe as a test bed for them to try out new technologies as well as new value propositions of more simplified service offerings. And I think that's a very interesting development. And over time, you could see customer migration happen naturally in this way.
Oh yeah, very interesting. But I mean, it's obviously a good point. I mean, to say telecom operators are traditional or conservative is probably an easy way to put that, because I think they're definitely seen as probably some of the most conservative out there. So, but you're right. It's interesting to hear that some of these companies, at least in Europe, are bringing out sub brands basically that they can then use as kind of the test beds for these services. That does make sense, because obviously you can get some experience, some real world experience there with how these work, and get more comfortable with it. Because again, I know for myself, talking with operators and analysts and different vendors, that it does seem like that's kind of the challenge, is getting carriers to be more comfortable with this move? Because as you guys have been mentioning, this is a huge dynamic change for these operators. This is changing how they're doing everything in their operations. And so, and being conservative companies, that's a big change for these guys. Well, I mean, I know one thing I've heard a lot too from operators is the need for having something that's carrier grade, and that's kind of maybe part of this conservative nature is the fact that they do want to have something that they know is going to work. And that's whether it's a 5 nines model or whatever you want to call it. Do you think, I guess, this need for that legacy view of carrier grade, is that still needed as we move towards virtualized OSS and BSS platforms, do you think? Or do you think that, since these things are so dynamic and can rapidly change, that, maybe a 3 nines or 4 nines model can probably handle the same type of services that operators need? I don't know, maybe Thomas, maybe your view on, I guess, that need for carrier grade going forward.
Yes, well, I think that, the uptime requirements for individual components might change a bit. It's still a must to have carrier greatness for the solution as a whole. Mm-hmm. We're still talking about telco services here after all, right? And I think it's a good thing that the NFV style virtualization with the orchestration can really deliver this enhanced software-based carrier grade capabilities through dynamic scaling and institution of redundancy and disaster recovery with its software capability. So I think it will be a complex setup, but in overall it will be easier to deploy carrier greatness and easier to keep it carrier grade as well, if you want to comment that.
Yeah, that makes sense. Yeah, it's a great point. And obviously, telecom operators do have a very complicated networks out there, and they're generating billions of dollars on a real-time basis. So yeah, it is definitely probably a step above perhaps a traditional data center or something like that. So, well, maybe Jerry, get your point on that. I mean, what do you think that this need for carrier grade going forward? What's your view on the importance of that, and I guess how are you guys looking to perhaps tackle that challenge of making sure that operators are comfortable with what you're bringing to market for them?
Yeah, absolutely. It's vital, particularly in the systems we deal with. They're in the call flow, and if there's an outage, it does impact subscriber service. So there's absolutely no issue other than we have to maintain the 5 nines. How we do it though is a different question. The old days of specialist hardware duplicated. That's no longer the requirement. We're now looking at kind of web scale type concepts, clustering. We still have to be able to provide the 5 nines availability, but in a different way. The other concern, obviously, would be that a lot of this web scale type technology hasn't before had to face this, 5 nines. It's more of an enterprise, and they deal in terms of recovery times of minutes. In the network, that just won't cut it. So as the skill sets evolve in operators and they become more IT focused, using kind of commercial enterprise type servers and software, they still have to be aware that the 5 nines rule still applies, and they have to engineer their solutions to basically provide almost no downtime. That's a different kettle of fish, I think, to what they've been used to in the past.
Yeah, that's a great point. And I think it's interesting too, because, I've talked to a lot of companies about this, and, the ones who have a lot of traditional telecom experience have perhaps a different, maybe more in line view with telecom operators about how this is going to work, where I've talked to some companies who are coming maybe from more the data center space, who I don't want to say they're a little more lackadaisical in kind of how they view the nines model, but, they definitely seem to have a different view on this. And it does seem like, from you guys, at least you guys have a lot of experience in the telecom space. You guys seem to have a view that seems more in line with what I've heard from what telecom operators are looking for. So that's an interesting view. I'm guessing that experience you guys have, it probably pays off pretty well when you guys are working with your telecom operator partners.
Well, absolutely, and it's the trust and the ability to deliver carrier grade solutions, even though they're virtualized. That's paramount, and it's something that maybe a lot of startups need to consider. The technology might deliver the functionality, but to deliver the carrier grade requirements of an operator, that's a significant challenge, I think.
Yeah, great point. Well, maybe just say, I guess, a wrap-up question for both of you guys. And you guys have both kind of touched on a little bit, kind of the challenges going ahead. But maybe with Thomas, I'm going to start with you. As you look at this move going forward, and obviously for you guys there at Procera, what is keeping you guys up the most at night? What are you hearing from your customers? Is what are their biggest challenges when they're looking at kind of making this move towards virtualization? And what's going to be your bane of existence for the next several years there at Procera?
I'm convinced that it is for the operators. The real challenge is to get the orchestration layer where it needs to be, and once that's in place, really the sky is the limit for visualization, both on the data plane and on the BSS plane.
Yeah, and honestly, I mean, getting the orchestration layer in place will be the big challenge, right? I'm sure that's going to be quite a bit of work ahead for you guys too, is working with those guys on making sure that part is in place and you guys are able to take advantage of that aspect as well. I mean, do you see any challenges with that orchestration layer getting where it needs to be? For Thomas.
But if I see a challenge with that, yes, I think that operators have a challenge in implementing this orchestration layer so that they can deploy any type of VNF package into their network.
Yeah,
that's the real challenge for them, to build that infrastructure out.
Yeah. Got it. Okay, and maybe Jerry, I guess get your final view on maybe what you see as kind of being the big challenge for you guys going ahead when it comes to working with operators on this.
Yeah, I'd agree with what Thomas said. I'd add to it and say that the need for open standards is paramount in this space as well, and that the challenge, I think, for the operators is to maintain the stance that open standards are required, and not to be sidetracked by the very large vendors that will always promise better capability in a proprietary fashion or a standards plus type fashion. The rule here has to be open standards now and open standards for everyone.
Yeah, that's a great point. And again, with this move towards virtualization, I think operators do want to keep that multi-vendor environment out there. So you're right. So that kind of that standards plus one or whatever some of the big guys are, maybe looking at doing, that could be a challenge. And you're right. Operators do probably need to stay focused on being able to stay open. I know talking with some of the ones here, at least domestically, AT&T here with their domain program, they're pretty big with that, and they're hoping, it looks like at least, to try to keep that as part of it. So I guess we'll see how that plays out moving forward. But again, guys, we definitely appreciate the great insight on this. Obviously, this topic is a growing interest across the telecom space, and hopefully we can catch up again soon on this topic. But again, thanks for the time today. We appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, perfect. Well, great. Well, with that, let's segue to our next segment here. Well, obviously, speaking of telecom operators, recently Verizon announced its SDN plans with 5 vendor partners, some of the big guys in the industry: Alcatel-Lucent, Cisco, Ericsson, Juniper, and Nokia Networks. As part of that, the announcement, it said it was working to move towards virtualizing platforms it said it's been working on virtualizing platforms over the past several years, including the creation of live lab environments in a number of locations, including in San Jose, California, Tampa, Florida, and its Waltham, Massachusetts engineering lab as well, and claims to have commercial data center environments on both coasts. So obviously, Verizon has not been perhaps the most vocal in describing its virtualization plans, but it sounds like it's been working pretty heavily behind the scenes on it as well. I recently had a chance to speak with Sean Hockel, who's the head of network planning, or head of network platforms and managed services at Verizon Enterprise Solutions, about the company's thinking around the move towards virtualization, NFV and SDN. First, I asked Sean about Verizon's overall view on moving towards virtualization. Let's take a look at that NFV strategy clip from Verizon, please.
Yeah, actually, so our strategy hits across all of our businesses.
Okay.
So as you'll see, that we were looking forward to sort of the the operational efficiencies and the and the quality service benefits across both wireless, consumer, and our enterprise. I specifically focus on enterprise, so I spent a lot of time on it. And it is something that's being asked for by our customers. So if you really think about it, this technology originally grew up in the data center.
Yep.
And it solved the problem that people had in terms of managing an environment where you had a lot of flexibility with the virtualized resources around compute and storage, and then you got kind of the edge of the data center, and the networking stuff required a whole stack of boxes, right? It's a build another box problem that people have, and deploying that technology is complicated, it's expensive, and it's not necessarily flexible. And so the reason there's a lot of interest is obviously with SDN and NFV, there's the possibility of automating and making that whole structure much more efficient. With the advances in that technology, as well as sort of advances in both the chipsets as well as the standards bodies, the ability to deploy that beyond the data center wall is arisen. And so people are looking for applications beyond kind of where this originally started, moved out into the core network, and you see a lot of interest there now. So SDN and NFV technology is probably, from my perspective, it's not going to replace the core of the network next week. Right? But what we have seen is a lot of interest from our customers in a number of use cases. People don't buy technology, they buy solutions, right? And so this helps in several instances where people are looking, for example, in the branch environment for solutions that let them leverage sort of multiple access technologies that may exist at a particular location, whether it be MPLS and broadband or MPLS and wireless, and being able to optimize kind of the treatment and flow of traffic, and then the security that you wrap around that at those sites. So, and this technology has the opportunity to provide a better experience in that respect. So we see a lot of interest there. You obviously see a lot of interest for folks that have this technology set up in the data center today to be able to extend it between data centers or across into other high priority sites. So we see that as a use case. From the NFV perspective, the NFV-based solutions for security solve a problem where traditional solutions have been difficult, more complex to implement at the edge. They may require a lot of gear that hasn't been cost effective for doing that or hasn't been able to meet that need. So sort of virtualization in the security space is another use case we see a lot of opportunity in terms of it just provides a better answer for a broader scope of users. And then, you know, I can keep going on this, right? When you look at WAN optimization when offered in NFV style solutions is actually better than the traditional solutions because it covers the whole experience from the data center through to the end user as opposed to just one segment. So those kinds of use cases are exciting for people because they provide a better solution. And that's why we're pursuing this. It's in the interest, again, you keep in mind, connecting users to apps, everything we can do to make that safer, more secure, and simpler is a good thing. And that's where we're focused.
Sean also provided some insight into the business case model surrounding the move towards NFV. Let's take a look at that business case clip, please.
So I think a couple things are emerging, right? So you're absolutely right in terms of the commercial models are still emerging. But what you see is when you move to an environment that's got more standardized platforms and is primarily software based, you have an opportunity to change some of the more traditional capital intensive constructs that are out there to a more utility based, more on-demand model. Some elements of the ecosystem will work that way, and some elements, you know, you can't banish. You still have to have a glass in the ground going somewhere, and so that, you know, there will be some elements of that just won't change. But you do definitely have the opportunity to provide people with more flexibility. In addition, when you think of it sort of from the mobile to the end user, to the cloud service provider community, there's a concentration of traffic there that's let us release some more sophisticated models even now. So already today, for enterprise customers looking to go from sort of the LTE-based device through to a cloud service provider, we offer a bandwidth on demand approach to connectivity with the SCI service. You could just specify one of the cloud service providers as a destination and pay on a per gigabyte basis. So where, you know, it happens to be the opportunity is there that you've got the concentration of traffic, the economics work for the carrier, they work for the customer, you give them a very cloud-like utility consumption model-based experience. Will that apply across the board to all services? I suspect not necessarily, but is the opportunity to do that more often out there? Yes. In addition, with the degree of automation and integration that this new technology supports, operationally becomes much more efficient. Today, with a network-based solution, with another build another box approach to solving stuff, you have to deploy this gear at the edges of the network, you have to configure it, you have to manage it, you have to keep it under constant supervision, and you've got to manage multiple deployments. Allowing this stuff, the intelligence to become centralized, to become the management much more centralized. You can operate it with production grade sort of industrial software management techniques, and it becomes essentially a more efficient deployment of the enterprise space. You can deploy more sophisticated solutions with more robustness because your control is more precise, it's more fine-grained, and it's got a significant degree of automation that didn't exist in the past. So that's where I think people start to see efficiencies.
Great insight there from Sean, and obviously great to hear about Verizon's plans there with virtualization. It sounds like they've been working on it for quite some time, but now a little more vocal about the move there. So it's great to get that insight there. Well, again, that'll do it for this week's NFV SDN Reality Check. I want to again thank my guests, Thomas Vasson, Jerry Donahoe, and Sean Hockel for their great insight today. And thanks for watching.
NFV SDN Reality Check with Dan Meyer is a production of RCR TV. To suggest show topics or to reach Dan, you can find him on email, dmeyer@rcrwireless.com, and on Twitter @Meyer_Dan. For more Dan, news on NFV SDN and everything wireless, find your way over to rcrwireless.com.